All right, aloha mai kako. Welcome everybody to the East-West Center Speaker Series. I'm delighted to welcome you all to our monthly series covering all sorts of issues across the Asia-Pacific region. The East-West Center Research Speaker Series is a recurring program to spotlight emerging developments across the region. Through the series, we explore environmental, demographic, political, and economic processes that are reshaping the Asia-Pacific region in profound ways. Today, we're really fortunate to have Dr. Krystof Obidzinski with us. He's a forest legality and sustainability specialist with over 20 years of experience across the Asia-Pacific region. He obtained his PhD from University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, working on socioeconomic dimensions of illegal logging and trade in Indonesia. He's also worked for more than a decade at the Center for International Forestry Research on issues on trade and investment, market-based mechanisms, and bilateral approaches to improve forest governance. He's currently at the European Forestry Institute working on timber legality, sustainability, traceability, and deforestation-free initiatives in Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. I feel very fortunate that we have the opportunity here, Krystof, share his thoughts today. We're working on some really exciting research here, covering global policies that are really deeply intertwined with climate change policies globally, but also have implications all the way down to local farmers working in and around forests on commodities that are present in supermarkets all around the world. So without further ado, I want to turn the floor over to Krystof to share your presentation. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us.
Okay, thanks very much for this introduction, Micah, and great to see more people streaking in the room. So that's very encouraging, and also great to see people online as well joining. So yeah, I just wanted to start by thanking again for this introduction, and this is a great opportunity for me to be here. This is my first time to Hawaii, first time to East-West Center, and I really look forward to sharing our observations on the research that we are doing with Micah as part of this fellowship. I will start now sharing the slides. I think I go to sharing screen share. Yeah, okay. I think it's here. Yeah, so this is the topic of today's talk. I'm going to talk about the emerging deforestation-free regulatory networks with specific focus on Asia Pacific, and we're going to talk about how these emerging regulatory frameworks drive what we call a transition in the governance of natural resource trade in globally, but also in the region. This is more or less the contents of my talk today. Before I actually jump into the substance, I would like to say a few more words about myself at the institution I come from and what I do there, and then a little bit more about the Rice Fellowship, and then we're going to go into the first paper that we have produced and which is going to come out this week on the overall transition in the global governance of commodities, and with specific emphasis on the EU Deforestation Regulation, which is kind of one of the main regulations in that area right now. And then we are going to talk about the second sort of focus or the output that we have, that I have under the fellowship, which is the U.S. Forest Act, which is a major U.S. regulation that's in the works, and then maybe end up with a few strategic, reflections on possibilities to cooperate, collaborate, and so on. Mike already actually said most of the things about me, so I'm not going to but this is just a standard description of like who I am. Yes, the topics I work on. Education already mentioned. Yes, I'm with EFI, and I worked with Green Growth Institute, C4, and a few other NGOs before. So I think I will largely skip that slide because this is already covered. But just for the sake of ticking that box, and you guys know who is who. A few words about EFI, and because this is like we are on the other side of the globe, and then so I think it's good to say European Forest Institute is a European Forest Institute. It's not EU Forest Institute. It's an important distinction. So it's independent research institute. Yes, it's focused largely in the EU. It's got 29 EU member states as members, but it's got a lot of research organizations as members as well, and more than 40 countries now signing up to the membership. So it's a research organization that's focused largely on Europe, but it's expanding. It's expanding globally, and if you look, no, this is actually the next one, but it's expanding. And within that institution, EFI, there is a division called International Forest Partnership Facility, and this is where I belong. And just a couple of words about this IPF. It's got this objective of protecting and restoring world's forests, and it's got these 4 pillars through which it's heading towards achieving its objectives. So it's about green economic growth, it's about climate change mitigation and adaptation, it's about sustainable commodity trade and production, and about poverty alleviation. So I fit in this third kind of column right here on fostering legal and deforestation-free commodity production and trade. And just quickly, okay, so we are present in quite a few countries. Again, it's not just Europe, it's quite a bit in Asia and Africa, and a few countries in Latin America. So, and actually I belong to the Asia office, which is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but I'm based for work in Indonesia. So I do most of my work in Indonesia and Laos. So quickly to go over again about the RISE Fellowship. So this is really about trying to understand this ongoing global transition in the governance of commodity trade, extraction and trade. We are looking at specifically two processes that are unfolding right now. One is this EUDR, which in EU Deforestation Regulation, which is supposed to enter into force on the 1st of January next year, 2025. And we wrote a paper about this, and it's coming out in API sometime this week, I understand. And then the second work is about the emerging US regulation on eliminating deforestation from commodity supply chains. So this is what we are doing right now, and we are hoping to complete this work this year. Essentially, it's to inform ongoing discussions about these transitions in the global market commodities, and also to explore potential. Right now it's about kind of writing and publishing together, but the idea is also to explore potential for maybe future collaboration on this important topic, which has implications for the region, which I will get into in a moment. So now we are getting into this kind of a quick overview of the first output, or the framing output, that we have just accomplished for this fellowship, which is the publication on the EU Deforestation Regulation. And it's kind of a framing paper about this transition to deforestation-free commodity trade. What sort of the statement that we make in the paper is that it's really not only about EU, it's not only about US. It's really not about any specific country, but it's more of a global process that's actually unfolding right now. So if you see here, yes, we have EU and there's EUDR, as I mentioned, EU Deforestation Regulation, but actually there's a lot more here in that block here in this red column. EU has a lot of regulations that are, green growth, sustainable finance, many other things there. Then you have EU national regulations. So within EU, you've got a whole bunch of countries advancing their own national regulation on deforestation-free commodity trade. And then you've got the world, which is exactly also what we are looking into. USA, Japan, Australia, there's a few other countries. Even China is considering implementing measures to ensure legality and sustainability. So really the questions that we are posing in this framing paper is about, okay, so this is this global transition, what are the drivers? And then how far is this really actually likely to go? How feasible it will be to achieve some of the stated objectives of eliminating deforestation from supply chains by, whatever it is, 2025, 2030, and so on. So this is what we start with, and then we actually go into detail. But before we go into the detail, I actually like to kind of take a step back and, when we talk about these global processes and global transitions in a global policy, I think it's kind of useful to see where we fit or where we are on that axis of cycles, what I call these global governance cycles of commodities. And obviously we are here at the very end here, 2024. And yes, we've got this emerging trend in the governance towards full traceability and deforestation-free in commodities, in commodity trade. But then you look back and you say, there was 10 years ago, it was all about REDD+. 20 years ago, it was all about illegal logging and trade. Then in the 90s, it was about, third-party certification and market-based mechanisms. And before that, it was, WWF. And so I kind of like to say that we are part of this global evolution of environmental governance. And I think, in order to understand, what's happening today with this deforestation-free business and full traceability demands, I think it's important also to know what happened before and how we fit into this trajectory. So anyway, now back into the details. So back to our framing paper. I just wanted to share a few concepts and highlight a few things that are important for the next, for understanding what we are doing next with the study on the US legislation. So EUDR, just a few concepts here for you. It's a global demand-based policy. So it's really about demand, regulating what comes or enters into the EU market. It's all about forests as defined by FAO. And it applies, this is interesting to know, EUDR applies to both EU and non-EU operators or businessmen. So it's not only, kind of projected on producing countries in Africa and Latin America and Asia, but it also applies to EU-based people. So it's supposed to be kind of equitable in that way, but opinions, of course, vary. It's all about no deforestation. So there's a provision there that there's, I think, 7 commodities that are covered under EUDR. soy, palm oil, timber, cacao, coffee, rubber, and derivatives. So all the items of products that are coming into the market in the EU from the 1st of January 2025 are supposed to be deforestation-free, produced without causing deforestation and degradation. And there are definitions there, of course, as well. And they're supposed to be legal, and they're supposed to be also traceable. So there are three main requirements: no deforestation, legal, and traceable. And maybe just to kind of reflect for a moment what it means, traceable is, basically ensuring that, like, let's take these tables here in the room. So these tables being imported, they have to be accompanied by information that explains the supply chain all the way back to what they called plot of land where timber was harvested. So it's a fairly detailed chain of information that is supposed to be put in place. And it's for every shipment that arrives in the EU. So that's traceable. Legal, meaning legal means based on the regulations and laws of the country of production or harvest. So it's based on national laws. So in that sense, it's based on the laws in the producer countries. And there are, like, I think, 8 requirements there in what constitutes legality. So I will not go into that, but this is the key concepts right here that we are discussing in the paper. And then we're getting into, like, okay, with all these concepts and so on, how will EUDR work? So there's a prohibition. This is kind of a little bit ambiguous, but the way EU like to talk about this, that EUDR is about prohibition, but it's not about a ban. Yes, it prohibits the import of commodities that are causing deforestation and degradation, forest degradation, but it doesn't ban them, meaning that, yes, you can import this kind of stuff, but if it gets identified as causing deforestation, then there are legal consequences. This is related to WTO requirements and kind of issues related to that. So that then another important thing is this due diligence. In the US, usually it's called due care, but it's the same thing, due diligence obligations. So meaning that importers that are importing the commodities into the market are supposed to collect information, assess information, decide whether this is sufficiently robust and, in terms of legality and traceability. And then they submit this information to the due diligence system that is going to be established. Actually, it doesn't exist yet, but it's in the works. And all this information becomes for them legally binding. So this is a fairly responsible process. Then you've got this country benchmarking, which is probably one of the most controversial parts, which is ranking countries, producer countries, in terms of risk of deforestation and forest degradation. And so there are these 3 categories here, as you can see, and these are decided based on a few indicators, such as rate of deforestation in these countries, rate of expansion of agro-commodities, corruption in kind of indicators, and governance and things like that. And all of that gets combined, and then countries gets benchmarked as low, standard, or high risk. And based on that, this determines the level of checks. So later, when shipments arrive in the country with chocolate, with cocoa, with, I don't know, rubber gloves, things like that, then the amount of checks that will be implemented depends on that. So this is another thing that we discussing. And so based on this country benchmarking, there will be differentiated due diligence. So countries that are marked as low risk, the due diligence or the information that importer needs to collect and submit will be simplified. And then for countries that are maybe high risk, I don't know, maybe like, Myanmar or some other countries, then the amount of information that needs to be collected and submitted is much higher. So that's differentiated. And then of course there will be these checks by the authorities in the they call them CAs, competent authorities. It's kind of a strange name, but it's basically customs people that will be conducting these checks. So this is how it's supposed to work. We are describing that, and then we say, what are the key issues with this kind of design and this kind of implementation structure? Our main reflections are that there are these relative impacts, most likely in the near future, once the regulation gets implemented, meaning that countries that can kind of implement and meet these new requirements will do that. And but there will be countries that maybe will not be able to really fully respond to these traceability and deforestation-free, and they will opt to simply shift the export to other countries, to other markets. So there will be, in the end, sort of like clean supply chains and maybe dirtier supply chains. This is what we are talking about, that the duality of clean and dirty. And if that happens, then we continue further that the overall objective of these regulations is to clean up global supply chains and contribute to climate change mitigation and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But if we end up with this duality of clean and dirty, then you will need additional efforts in key markets, in these alternative markets, especially China and India, to address these issues and to address the dirty commodities heading over there. We also flag the potential for collateral damage. So you've got this country benchmarking, right? High, medium, low. And what it means also is that the countries get benchmarked per country and not per commodity. So if there is, let's say, one commodity, let's say palm oil palm, which causes a lot of deforestation, but then you've got other commodities in the same country, cacao, coffee, and others that do not, probably they don't cause that much deforestation. Still, all of them gets labeled as high risk or medium risk or whatever it may be because of this one particular commodity that is causing deforestation. So collateral damage, this is another thing that we are flagging. Complexity and cost. So this is it's more on the receiving end, and vast amounts of resources and funding that are going into developing this thing in the EU, and we are wondering whether it would not be a better, if there's a better choice to use these funds rather than pump them all into the development of due diligence, and maybe a bigger part of it should be used for producer countries. Implications for vulnerable groups. This is a big deal, especially for smallholders, for farmers. Millions of them out there in producer countries in all these commodities, and the effort and that will take to address this. This is just to draw your attention here for a moment to the issue of smallholders involved in all these supply chains, and and potential implications and efforts that will be needed to bring them up to speed and to enable them to meet the new market requirements. If you look here, this is just one. I wanted to show this orange color right here. You can see that this is oil palm, this is cacao, coffee, and rubber, and this is in Indonesia only. Okay, we are talking about one country, so we are talking about roughly 40%, 41% of land of oil palm being run by smallholders. Something like 6.7 million hectares and millions of smallholders. Well, if you look at cacao, that's like 99% is smallholders, coffee 98, and then rubber 90%. So it's all small land holdings, millions of people, millions of families, and most of them do not have land titling. So this is going to be a major effort right there to actually help them get registered, legalized, formalized, and be able to face and respond to these new requirements. This is just to kind of flag one of the challenges that are there. It's not to say that the EUDR they should stop or whatever, but I mean you have to start somewhere with these different regulations to address climate change. But I mean just in terms of challenges. Another point that I wanted to flag here as well is the issue of the complexity of the supply chain. And this is something that gets talked about very little, but I just wanted to draw your attention. This is a rubber supply chain from Vietnam. Vietnam exports a lot of rubber. So here's Vietnam. But Vietnam gets quite a lot of its own rubber from Laos and from Cambodia, right? So this is already like, okay, where is it? Yes, so here we go. Rubber travels from Laos and Cambodia to Vietnam. It gets lumped there, it gets processed, yeah, and then it gets exported, right, to the EU here and to the US here. So this is a direct export. It's quite a bit. It's almost $500 million directly to Europe, and it's about 1.5 billion US to the US. But if you look here, Vietnam exports quite a lot to China, and it's about like 2 billion or so US. And of course, China processes it and imports from all over the place. And then China exports, the export of rubber products from China to EU and to US are much bigger, 3.7 billion US, 5.3 billion right here. Point being here is that once these regulations, deforestation-free and full traceability, go into effect in the EU, and then, okay, later we will get to the US in a moment, then all these products, rubber products that are arriving here will have to be traced back here. There will have to be information available on this. And so a lot of people don't think about this. They just say, oh, rubber arrives from Vietnam to EU or US directly. And that's it. It's much more complicated than that. So I'm just flagging that this is one of the areas that we think a lot more research is needed to actually understand what's going on and how this traceability could be done. And just again here, so yes, a lot of direct trade, but this whole indirect trade, particularly through China and India as well, to some extent, particularly, it needs additional attention, and because there's a lot of in between countries, and very little is known about this right now because it's very difficult to access data. Data sometimes is not readily available and in languages that are easy to access. So this is about EUDR, and this is just a concluding slide. So we are concluding with a quick review of EUDR that there's a real readiness problem, considering all these issues with particularly with smallholders and with potential side effects of EUDR. Communication and engagement is very limited. It's kind of a weird thing that we see in the global markets these days, where I think in the past it was kind of a norm that consumer countries and producer countries would engage, would have like sort of collaboration, partnerships, very kind of like constructive engagement and intensive engagement, right? I mean, but what we see right now is that it's transitioning to kind of like much more one-sided situation where consumer countries like EU Deforestation Regulation implements its own regulation, and producer countries just have to fall in line and basically figure out what to do and how to meet these new requirements. Assistance quite limited, at least up to now. And again, this is largely in relation to the EU Deforestation Regulation. And credible verification, this is also what we concluded is something to be seen, how this can be credibly done, especially on the receiving end in the EU. You know, how to close the gaps, how to avoid this leakage to third countries, to these kind of more dirty markets, you know, because if it happens and it cannot be stopped, then we essentially, you know, the whole concept of reducing deforestation, degradation, reducing emissions kind of misses its target. And how to implement this whole thing without, you know, major negative implications, displacement and marginalization of vulnerable groups, particularly smallholders and farmers. So this is the framing piece. This is what, okay, EUDR is still not happening. It's going to start happening in January next year. But this is what we are already seeing in the preparation mode, in the preparation phase as of right now. And this is kind of informative for us, because now in the second part of our work here under the Rice Fellowship, we are really focusing on, okay, what is US doing? And US is doing a lot, and it's really interesting. It's the US Forest Act, forest meaning fostering rule of law and environmentally sound trade. It's very much along the lines of EUDR, but it's a little bit different. It's about eliminating illegal deforestation. Yeah. So EU wants to eliminate all kinds of deforestation from the commodity supply chains. US is a little bit more nuanced and say, okay, we want to just get rid of illegal deforestation, because whether deforestation happens or not is actually up to the producer countries to decide. We don't want to interfere with them and decide for them. So illegal deforestation is to be eliminated. It's important to know it's a locally grown here, homegrown initiative. It was initiated by Senator Brian Schatz, the Forest Act, actually back in 2021, and it's been, yeah, and now I think it was in December 23 it was revised and resubmitted, and it's now in Congress, and it looks like it will be approved. So this is a great story here, and a major contribution from the state of Hawaii to clean up global commodity supply chains. Coverage is slightly different than EUDR. It's oil palm, soybeans, cocoa, and rubber, and derivatives. There's a whole list of HS codes that are there. Timber, this is the important part. Timber is not part of it because it's already covered under different legislation. And Lacey Act also has been upgraded, and so coverage has been expanded there. So US is much more nuanced in a way that they don't want duplication. They have Lacey Act, it covers timber, so we don't need to do that again. And US is very frank also in saying that it's banning. It's banning agro-commodities that are causing illegal deforestation. So it's not going, it's not hiding about it. It's just stating it up front. Just a quick picture here about illegal deforestation. And also, again, we're going to get into this. We are going to research this, and we're going to describe it. But identifying illegal deforestation will be a major issue and a major challenge. And just to show you here, this is a publication from a couple of years ago by Forest Trends. According to Forest Trends, 69% of all global deforestation is illegal. Illegal meaning in one way or another, the deforestation or land or forest clearing violates some kind of national law in one producer country or another. So it's a little bit open to to interpretation and so on, but you know, you can see right away here that this is a major portion of deforestation that's likely illegal. And then at the bottom part here, you see all these countries that are involved there. There's no surprises here. All the main suspects are here: Brazil, Indonesia. Some of them have more openness or more accessible information on deforestation than others. So that will be another piece of the puzzle to solve. And here, just a quick note from one of the publications from a couple of years ago. Again, 1 in 5 hectares of oil palm in Indonesia is illegal. So 20 or 25% of oil palm in Indonesia is considered illegal in one way or another. So that will have major implications on a couple of things, and I'm just listing here a major part of the U.S. Forest Act, if it passes. It's this due care declaration. So on the EUDR, remember we had due diligence. Here it's due care. It's the same thing. Importers have to provide information on where their raw material and products come from. It will be checked by the U.S. Customs Border Protection. It's risk-based. It's going to look the level of risk that commodities are exposed to in terms of illegal deforestation. If the risk is significant, then the traceability requirement will be extended all the way to the plot of harvest. And then this action plan countries, I just wanted to flag that because all these countries here, they are having major problems, potentially problems with illegal deforestation, will be subject to this action plan, meaning that there will be there's supposed to be a major effort to help them kind of address these illegalities and also ensure full traceability. Enforcement, yes, it's by the Customs and Border Protection. And then this Trusted Trader Program, this is kind of similar to the EUDR simplification of, if the risk level is low. Trusted Trader is more about like if a trader already submitted due care information multiple times, they don't have to do it every single time, but there will be kind of a simplified procedure for them. And okay, so the important point that we see here and an opportunity in this research on the U.S. Forest Act and what's happening there is the opportunity to inform. I know my time is okay. I'm going to speed up here. So this is really important because there are quite a few elements in the U.S. Forest Act, as we know, that are fairly general, fairly poorly defined, or not entirely defined. And so the details are there to be spelled out still. And so we are right now part of in communication with WRI, which is actually an institution that is helping the Department of State Department and the Department of Agriculture to develop the details on how, once U.S. Forest Act gets passed and enacted, how would it be operationalized in practice in terms of traceability and identifying illegal deforestation. So in this blue box here, there's a real opportunity here for us to, with this study and paper, to influence this process and provide information. And then in terms of next steps, so we are working now beginning to work on the second paper. We're going to be doing interviews, and we hope to meet with Senator Schatz's environment team to discuss U.S. Forest Act. We are going to be having all kinds of meetings with the government, with private sector think tanks. And at the end of it all, we are hoping to produce a second publication or paper for the Asia Pacific issues, and to really discuss, once we do all of that, I really hope that we can also kind of talk about, what's next. I mean, paper is nice and everything, and it's good to do that and contribute to the policy process. But I think there will be quite a bit of work to do beyond that, like, capacity building, work in producer countries. So I hope that we can maybe talk about collaboration and things like that beyond that fellowship. So this is what I had for today. This is I know it's a little bit dense and a lot of kind of technical stuff, but thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up. So thanks very much, and over to you, Micah.
Great, thanks so much. You could stay up there. I think we're gonna have a good Q&A session. I've been fielding lots of questions here on the online chat, so I'm clustering them and we'll share them with you. I think a lot of people talk about climate change and climate change policy all the time. So density is much appreciated here, because we need to understand how those things get operationalized, right? So we've seen a picture here of how the United States and how the EU in particular, the EU is a couple years ahead in terms of implementing these deforestation-free regulations, but it gives us a window into what's required in terms of making sure these are accountable and implemented adequately and correctly, and to the extent that they will be successful. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. It's been a lot of discussions here on the Q&A. The first one, and you've touched a little bit about technical assistance and things like that, especially on the U.S. Forest Act side. But can you give us some examples, or tell us? This is a question from Sita. Dina Sita Ekaputri. She asked, what are the kind of, because this is a demand side regulation, what kinds of support are these demand side sort of initiatives providing to these countries in terms of implementation?
Yeah, thanks for this. So, I mean, as far as I know, the support that we are talking about is based.
Stop share. So
okay.
Are you going to pull up the slide?
I don't need. Yeah, so I will stop sharing. Okay, here we go. No, how do I? Okay, here. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of support, yeah, it's, as far as I understand, this is going to be, it's in the form of projects, right? Like assistance projects, development projects. I know that in relation to the EUDR, there are already bilateral projects funded by, I don't know, Germany, Netherlands, in key producer countries. But it's all like, I mean, so far it's fairly, I mean, my point was that so far it's fairly limited. I mean, we are talking about huge complexity, huge potential impacts, huge importance for these countries, for livelihoods, many of these commodities. So like, and fairly, like, for example, in Indonesia, timbers, forestry is considered to be best prepared, but all these other commodities are really way behind. So assistance in terms of developing systems, IT systems, developing all these, technical, traceability systems, all of that, capacity building, all of that needs to be done. And all of this basically needs funding, and significant at that. So some of it is coming, but it's kind of like, we are essentially 6 months away from EUDR getting implemented, right? So this is sure, the time is short. I mean, for US Forest Act is in a good situation, because here we are still in a waiting mode, and we still have the time to learn. But so no, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about assistance. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Does somebody in the room have a question before I take another one from online? Okay, if you do have a question, make sure you push the red button to get the audio heard. The next kind of follow-on question from that is, it's a question about efficacy and optimism about the implementation of these frameworks. So first, can you tell us a little bit about the key differences between the EUDR and the US Forest Act? You talked a little bit about how the commodities are different, but they are slightly different regulations and they're part of a different set of cluster regulations. So tell us a little bit about the differences and share your thoughts on how optimistic you are, the extent to which they'll be successful.
Okay, so I'll just make it real simple. There are two key differences between EU Deforestation Regulation and US Forest Act. EU is, like I said, this broad, sweeping regulation that seeks to exclude all deforestation from commodities. They don't care whether this is legal, illegal, whatever you may have. As long as there is deforestation involved in commodity production. And I forgot to mention that there's a cutoff date. So if deforestation happened before 31st of December 2020 on the EUDR, that is still okay. But if deforestation happens after 2020, that is not allowed. And so your product or whatever it may be that arrives and is determined to have caused deforestation after 2020, then it will not be allowed to be marketed in the EU. So, okay, it's broad coverage of no deforestation and forest degradation whatsoever. On the US Forest Act, it's all about excluding illegal deforestation. So there's a major difference right there because US says we only want to get rid of illegal stuff, but whatever is legally, as far as forest clearing that is legal in Brazil, Indonesia, and other producer countries, that's okay because this is up to these countries to decide. So there's a bit of a nuance there. US gives more freedom to these countries to decide what they do with their forests. And then, as you mentioned, Micah, there's a difference in commodities, but it's not that much. It's actually quite similar. What else? I think these are the key differences. Yeah. And in terms of my optimism or pessimism, both regulations will be difficult to implement. I mean, there's no doubt. In my mind, EU is investing millions and millions into the infrastructure, into mapping, into satellites, into figuring out how to verify different plots of land, whether deforestation took place or not. And I think US is watching closely because, I think I don't know if you followed the press lately, you probably noticed that there has been some pushback in the EU itself and against EUDR because some of the pushback within EU. So there are agricultural associations, exporters, some major EU players in the EU agricultural sector have started pushing back, saying, "Oh, this is too complicated. This is really a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and it's going to just add cost." And so they've been pushing for simplification, but it's unlikely to happen. I think it's too late in the game. So I think US is watching this very closely and say okay, wait, we can learn from this. And I think also this is also the use of our paper. I think that this is why we looked at EUDR first before we jump into US Forest Act. So we have a bit of a learning experience there and can reflect on these things.
Questions? Yes.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. Today is the Earth Day. I think today's topic is very meaningful presentation. I would like to ask about among the European countries. I think there are many countries France and Germany are very rich countries, and in contrast, the Eastern European countries are relatively not so much rich countries. So I think in order to buy the commodity, observing the deforestation rules, the price of the commodities is higher than the other commodity, so which do not observing the rules. So in terms of the regulating the rules among European countries, so how do they deal with this this matter? So so I think the price it will be among the country if the European countries take the same rules, the price will be very similar among the European countries. So how can
yeah okay, yeah, I just respond to that. No, this is good. Thanks very much. You know, this is a question about premium price. Is there a premium price for deforestation-free commodities or not? And how does this apply to, you know, because yeah, of course, EU, I mean, what is it, 30 countries now, I think, or 29? There are major differences between, you know, EU member states. Netherlands is very different from, I don't know, Romania or something like that. So, so to answer your question, first of all, this EU Deforestation Regulation will apply to all all EU member states. It doesn't matter, rich or poor or whatever it is. It applies equally to all of them. So all of them, each country will have this so-called competent authority, which is basically customs. And these customs will be asked to enforce this. So when soybeans, palm oil, wood, or, you know, these commodities coming in, yeah, this is going to be enforced. And so so the first question, it doesn't matter. And the other thing about premium price, there is no premium price. That is clear. I mean, that's basically the idea is that the benefit that the importers are getting, basically the benefit is having access to the EU market, because EU market is supposed to be this higher end value added. It's not a huge market. I mean, in many aspects, US is a bigger market for some commodities. China is a big, but yeah, I think as far as I know, there's no any additional, you know, higher price or premium price or anything like that. It's just the benefit is access to the market. That's what I know.
Great, and this connects to questions from Bill Armbruster online. You know, you talk about the differentiation between the EU side, but can you talk also a little bit about how this might be experienced differently in a country like Indonesia versus a country like Laos or Vietnam, which you've been working on? So
Yeah.
the other side of that.
No, that's super. Great question. Thanks for that. This is yes. So you've got this differentiation between the member states in the EU, if we talk about the EUDR, but then you have as great or even greater differentiation if you look at the producer countries. So let's say, like you said, exactly, Indonesia and let's say Laos or Thailand maybe. In terms of you know, there's significant difference between in readiness of these countries to respond to these new requirements, to meet you know, traceability and deforestation-free. So, like I said, Indonesia in many ways is considered a front runner, you know, in timber and in oil palm. You know, it's got IT online systems in place, even though they have quite some way to go. Other countries like Laos, you know, I love the country and I work there, but they have ways to go to do this. And so luckily, Laos is one of the greatest recipients of foreign aid. You know, they get all kinds of aid from Germany, particularly. And so, I mean, they're in a good position that they have a lot of money and they can probably catch up. But there's a lot of difference between these countries. So some will be front runners, some will be kind of lagging behind. And this is also what we are finding in our paper. Yeah.
Yeah, really good point. You wanted to ask a question? I want to, one question from online, Kevin Woods is asking, and you know, one of my favorite parts of the presentation was contextualizing this historically, right? These cycles of different sorts of initiatives that are implemented in terms of regulating global commodity chains towards meeting these sort of environmental outcomes or these environmental governance mechanisms. So what is your opinion? You talked a little bit about the efficacy, but what do you think needs to be done? What additionally needs to be done to have a better success at this? You talked about the technical assistance and having to be able to reach these sort of goals. But what are your thoughts on what needs to be done beyond the technology and things?
Yeah, so aid, of course, and you know, will be key regardless. I mean, for both regulations and any other regulation, similar regulation that comes up. You know, the UK has something similar as well, and it's working to upgrade it. But I think advocacy is critical here, because I think you know, these regulations are not set in stone. You know, when EUDR goes into effect in January next year, it's like a first iteration of it. And then I think it's 4 or 5 years' time, there will be a review of it. And so there will be a process to argue about it and review and revise and, you know, add commodities or reduce commodities, talk about approach, talk about, you know, assistance. I think advocacy to, you know, so it's super important to like keep advocating for, in my opinion, you know, engagement and communication. This is like one of the things that are really starkly different from what was happening before. Like if you compare like a decade or two ago in terms of, you know, North-South cooperation on natural resource management and stuff like that, it was completely different. It was partnership, it was bilateral, it was mutual, it was, you know, by consensus. Right now, it's kind of like, bang, here's a, you know, demand side regulation, and producer countries have to adjust, and you know, you have to find your way. And so I think you know, advocating for a more nuanced and kind of a open-minded approach. I'm not saying going back into this kind of very broad and bilateral process is necessary, but a little more of engagement and communication, I think, is definitely needed.
Great, thanks. Ima, final question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the topic because I'm social worker, but my question is quite simple actually. Like, how does this two regulation like EUDR and like US Forest Act like connect to the human, you know, human part of, you know, because there's a conversation about like legality and illegality, and in the work of, behind all the work, there are human resources that is part of it. How does it really connect to the human side? If, for example, like a country like try to what is called to get all the certificate done, but they don't do really good in the human part. So how does it entitle to that one?
I think it's a really good question, especially in the context we're talking about large scale, big company operations versus smallholder.
Exactly.
But there's a big dimension of labor and mobility and things that Ima has been doing really amazing work around.
Yeah, so I mean, no, thanks for this, because this is like really clarifies, and this is super important. You know, this human dimension, labor dimension, livelihood dimension. I mean, because I mean, there's no question that, you know, if we have these regulations come into force, and then we have these leaders or front runners and countries lagging behind, obviously, kind of another transformation in the market that we are also, you know, discussing in our first paper is this differentiation between, you know, large companies, conglomerates that are able to meet these requirements you know, more easily, and then you've got smaller companies and small and medium enterprises that cannot, and kind of get sidetracked or maybe even excluded from the trade, at least temporarily, you know, until they catch up and get the skills and capacities. So no, I mean, that's, and so what happens to these people? I mean, do they get laid off? You know, do they transition to some other work? You know, some other sector? You know, is it going to really come down to a major fundamental transformation in some of these sectors that, like, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people will, you know, let's say from oil palm will get transferred to, I don't know, work in factories. We don't know yet, you know, that yet. Yeah, I think, you know, I personally think, I don't think it will get that far. I think there will be some, let's say, trials and tribulations in the initial year or two, where, yeah, there will be leaders. And there will be companies that have it easier, big companies that have a lot of capital, and they can tick all these boxes easier and do these procedures easier. And there will be some companies that will have difficulties, but so, yeah, I don't know. I think I really don't know how to answer that question, but I think I hope it's not going to be like a major disruption in the markets, but there will be a definite transformation. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Krystof.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Okay, thanks again, Krystof. Really great presentation. Really operationalize our thinking about what climate change policy is in terms of how some of the biggest economies are thinking about implementing it, what the implications are for just everyday things in our food and products, and just how interconnected the global supply chain and how much it affects forests and the environment around the world. I think this is a good start, but I think there's going to be lots of discussions on environmental governance going forward here at the East-West Center. I do want to thank everybody for attending in person. I want to thank everybody for attending online. There will be a recording of this on YouTube for those that have missed it. If you missed part of it and want to revisit it, it'll be available on our speaker series website. I also want to let you know about an upcoming, another talk we're having this week. We're hosting on Wednesday, April 24th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. The topic is time-saving appliances and educational pitfalls, evidence from Pakistan. Our speaker is Farina Noor Malhi, who's an assistant professor at the Department of Economics at the University of Bath. So join us on Wednesday, and we hope you'll keep attending our speaker series. Once again, thank you to Krystof Obidzinski. Wonderful presentation today on global deforestation-free regulations. And thanks again, everyone, for coming.